Medical Mariner, Inc.
Ladies and gentlemen, coming to you live from our Norfolk studio, home of the Atlantic Fleet, Medical Mariner, Inc.
Hello and welcome to Medical Mariner, Inc. I'm your host, Paul Stewart. This podcast is going to cover my journey in life, some things I have learned. We will talk about medicine, about PA school, about changing careers, about tattoos, and scuba diving, technical diving. Might even talk about skydiving in there, growing things, resilient living, training, anything else that comes to mind. I will attempt to get some folks on here now and then to talk about things with us, and we'll see where this journey goes. Thanks for listening, and now here's today's episode. Hello and welcome to today's special episode of Medical Mariner, Inc. This is a little bit out of the normal distribution schedule, and I just decided that I was going to do an episode on seed starting and realized I probably needed to get out there in time for it to be useful to some folks. We're going to talk about starting seeds and seed flats. If you don't know anything about that, that's okay. Also, not going to go super deep into gardening in general on this, as this is just about getting the seeds started. And since I live in an apartment right now, I'm going to plan to grow them in a pot on my balcony out back. And I've had a fair amount of success with that in the past, living in Florida and places like that. So a big question some folks have is, why on earth would you even want to go about starting seeds in flats? Well, maybe it's too cold outside where you live right now to be able to safely start plants. It might even be too cold in the soil for the seeds to germinate. Most seeds need to be above 65 degrees to germinate. And you also need to keep in mind, when is the last frost date where you live? Even a light frost will kill a little tiny plant. Another reason, and it kind of goes hand in hand with the last frost date as to why you'd want to do this, is you want to get a little bit of a jump on the growing season. You might want to get things started before you're going to have that germination temperature or that last frost date. So you start them in seed flats inside. Other thing it's good for is if you're trying to put together plants that you're then going to share or possibly even sell. Think going to a farmer's market or maybe advertised online if that's how you're planning to sell your plants. Also, some plants, especially things like tomatoes and peppers and stuff like that, they're just easier to start in seed flats than they are to get going as a direct seeding into the final pot or the soil. In keeping with the idea of the last frost date and things, I actually looked mine up here in Richmond, Virginia. The last frost date here is about April 9th. I looked that up using the Old Farmer's Almanac website and their last frost date calculator. Again, this is an estimate of when the last light frost usually occurs in an area. Some years it's earlier, some years it's later, but that usually gives you a good estimate when you can put your seedlings out there. If you're new to gardening, it's always a good plan to do a little bit of research on making sure you're doing things well. One thing you might consider, just a general reference that I've liked for a while, it's Steve Solomon's book, Gardening When It Counts, Growing Food in Hard Times. This is a great book to go ahead and get all of your things that you need. It talks about fertilizer. He's got a really good formula on page 21 in here that you can use. I don't have his permission, so I'm not going to republish it here, but it's a complete organic fertilizer. One of the things it calls for in that fertilizer is a high quality seed meal. A lot of us Americans, we have high quality seed meal laying around the house in our coffee grounds. I also have had luck going to some of the local coffee shops in the area, put a trash can in there and ask them to throw their coffee grounds in there. And I get a lot of high quality seed meal that way that I've used when I've been growing a fairly large garden before. He's got other tips in here, things like how to prepare your soil, other things like sharpening your tools. It's amazingly how much better a sharpened shovel works than an off-the-shelf shovel. Also talks about things like laying out rows and how to treat your plants, thin your plants, space them for water optimization when you may be growing in an environment where you don't have access to irrigation and things. Now here, again, I'm not going to focus on growing the plant in a garden. I'm going to focus on ones that I'm going to grow in a pot because that's how I'm going to do them here. Some of the seeds I have, I might end up taking up to my parents' house and letting them grow there just because I think they will do better there. And some I'm going to do in pots in my kitchen because they're going to be some things I will use there as well. There's some stuff that'll grow okay in pots. There's some stuff that won't. You can actually get tomatoes and peppers to do okay in pots. Herbs do well in pots. Some flowers do. Other things like corn and squash and beans and stuff like that, those tend to not do so well in pots just because they need a better root structure and they need room to grow that you're not going to get in the pot. Another thing to keep in mind is, where do you get your seeds from? You can a lot of times find seed packets at local nurseries, home improvement stores, sometimes grocery stores. A lot of folks don't think those are the best quality. I've never really had a lot of problems with them. In fact, if you look at my Instagram page, Ink Heavy, there's actually some success I had with some extremely old packet seeds that I'd gotten and stored in a mason jar with some oxygen absorbers. Those are still cruising along over here in pots on my kitchen shelf. I started those back in December. I did have a supplier I used to like to use. They got bought out by one of the big conglomerates, so I've been using Eden Brothers seeds. They're based out of North Carolina. They have some good stuff. I have a few that I'm going to start here. I'm going to show you today working with the Principe Borghese seeds. These are tomatoes. I've got a couple of other varieties of tomatoes I'm going to be doing as well. Also going to be doing some chamomile and some lavender and some purple coneflower, also known as echinacea. One of the really cool things about Eden Brothers seeds is all of your seed packets are going to have some instructions here on them that talk to you about what are the ideal growing conditions for the seeds and the planting conditions for them and things like that. You'll also see they have this quick read code right here where you can actually zap that into your phone and it'll take you right to the Eden Brothers website where they'll have a lot more detailed instructions. That's one of the reasons I like them and like to use them. So now what are you going to need to get started to grow your seeds? You're going to need some soil. I just buy potting soil, usually whatever's inexpensive down at the local home improvement store for things I'm starting in a pot. You're going to need some water. You're going to need your seeds. Then you're going to need your seed flats. I actually ordered these on Amazon. These are some small ones. They come as several different parts. This is your little vent for the top. This is your top cover. The little vent plugs into that hole there and can cover up these holes. Here's the actual seed flat itself. Notice it's got the little holes in the bottom. Water can come up through. And then here's the tray that you use to grow things in. They come with labels that you can stick in your soil so that you can, when you plant things, keep a track of what you've planted where. That's always a good plan because seedlings look shockingly similar to one another when they're growing, and a lot of times you can't tell them apart, so make sure you label what you're going to be doing. I already pre-filled out a label for our tomato seeds that we're going to be planting today. A couple of other things you may want. You may want a pair of tweezers to pick up your seeds. Might want to have something you can pour your seeds out onto to pick them up from. You're going to want some kind of scoop for your soil to get it out of the bag. I'll just use a plastic cup. I've also mixed up some of the soil. I got this out of a soil bag, and I also put in a few scoops of my coffee grounds I've been saving to make the soil a little bit richer, possibly a little bit better for getting things going. You may also want to consider, if you don't have a sunny area to put your seeds once you get them started, whether or not you want to get some grow lights. Normal indoor lights are not going to have the full bandwidth of light that plants need to grow. So if you can't get them in some sunlight, then get some grow lights. You can get them pretty cheap on Amazon, places like that. If you don't put your plant in sunlight after you've seeded them, they will get what they call too leggy. That is, they'll grow too tall and thin too fast. Most seeds have an enzyme in them that when it's dark, they'll tend to grow really quickly and straight up. This is designed to help push the plant up from the soil when it's buried beneath a light layer of it. So you need to have some sunlight equivalent or sunlight coming onto them, or they will get kind of strange looking. So what do you do to start? First thing you want to do is wash off everything with a dilute bleach solution. This way, if there's any bacteria or viruses, plants do get attacked by bacteria and viruses, you can get those all washed off, keep everything clean and ready to go. Then you go ahead, you put your soil into the flat. I already have a flat here that I've put soil in. I've also got water in the bottom of this flat to water the plants. You want to go ahead and get your seeds ready. I recommend not opening your seeds until you're ready to plant them. This way they don't get moist, accidentally sprout. You don't want them to, things like that. You want to be neater, you can cut these off with a pair of scissors. You can see I'm just tearing the top off here. Struggling a little bit with my neuropraxia from that shoulder dislocation a while back. I'm going to put the seeds right here, a few of them, so that I can get to them easily. I don't know if you can see that right there, and spread them out a little bit. And I'm going to pick them up with my tweezers. I'm going to put 2 or 3 in each cell here. Actually 3 or 4. Usually go for 3. The reason I do with tweezers is that way I can control them easier, what I'm putting into where. I'm not going to fill all the cells up because that would probably get boring for you, but I'll do it for a couple of them so that you kind of get the gist of what I'm doing here. Fill up this one row with them. You should also read your seed instructions. Some seeds like to have a little bit of soil put over top of them. Some like to stay on the surface. Tomatoes are usually one of the ones that like a little bit of soil on top of them. So I'm going to get a little bit of my soil out of the box here, sprinkle it over, just a very light coating. Now I've already put water in the bottom of this tray to water the seeds from below, but you can also water them from the top. You do want to be careful not to wash your seeds away if you're doing that. You can also use like a spray bottle. You can mist it on there as well. The other important thing you want to do to not get confused on what's grown where is put your label in there on your seeds so that you'll say, okay, that's those kind of tomatoes growing there, not some other kind of tomatoes. I'm probably going to fill this whole seed flat up with that kind of tomatoes so that I will know that that's what's in here, and I'll just put that one label. If you're going to have different ones, you can label each individual one. Once you have them, you put the cover on. You may see some condensation things forming in there with the light on it. So you can turn this and let air in or out. You want to use this kind of like a terrarium for the near term though. You cover it up, put that in some light, and your seeds will start sprouting and growing. Now let's talk a little bit about what the heck am I going to do with these things once I've got them all set up, going and ready to move outdoors, plant them in whatever their final home is going to be. First off, once they get 2 to 3 sets of leaves growing in that little seed flat, you're going to want to thin it down to 1 plant in each cell in the flat. So each one of these little squares is what we call a cell. You're going to want 1 plant and 1 plant only growing to maturity in there. So if all 3 of the seeds you put in that cell sprout, the reason we put more than 1 is because sometimes they don't all sprout. Various seeds have different germination rates, but then you're going to want to thin it back. The way you do that is you actually take a small pair of scissors, wash them off with a little bit of alcohol first, and then trim the 2 weaker looking, 2, 3, whatever weaker looking plants. Cut them off at the soil line so that those 2 will die off and your one that you wanted to keep will continue growing in that cell. The reason you cut them and don't pull them out is if they got any root intermingling, and you don't pull out the one you want to keep. And then you let them continue to grow. Once they get about the length of your index finger, maybe a little bit shorter, maybe a little bit longer, kind of gauge it on your seed flat. That's when you might want to think about moving them to a newer, larger pot. This is not going to be their final home, most likely, although theoretically it could be. You put them in a 4-inch pot. If you're planning to grow them further to get them into a garden or to sell them, they have some organic composting ones that are made out of fiber. If you use those, you're going to have to cut them down the sides and spread them out a little bit before you plant that soil. Otherwise, it'll get root bound in that other pot. You could also get some inexpensive plastic ones that they're ideal if you're shipping them places or if you're going to be selling them to people. And then if you're going to keep them in the house and look at them or things, you can put them in a small like terracotta pot, like what I use for my herbs over there on the kitchen counter. Once they grow up to be 8 inches to a foot tall in that pot, You can think about moving them to their final home. You're going to want to, if you're growing things like tomatoes and stuff on your balcony, put them in a 1 or 2 gallon pot. You don't want to go crazy and get the big banana tree pots that some people get, but just, something that it's going to have room to develop some root structure and grow. You can move them into the garden if you want to. Before you move a plant outside permanently, you've got to actually do what we call harden it to get it out there. That means you expose it to the elements for a few hours each day before you put it out there, and you extend that length of time every now and then. You start off with a couple hours, then maybe the next day 3 or 4, and then do that till the plant has gotten used to, hey, there's environmental changes. I'm not in this nice controlled place anymore. And it will be able to tolerate. If you just put new seedlings out and they all of a sudden are blasted by the wind, sun, rain, all that, they freak out and they tend to die off pretty quickly. You want to start thinking about your pest control strategy, because you're going to have to do that. You might want to just go ahead and use modern pesticides that are available. You might have an organic strategy that you want to use. There's lots of different ways. You can manually inspect your plants, remove insect eggs. You can actually, if you find insects, tobacco caterpillars, they tend to get into tomatoes and like to eat them a lot and kill them off. A tobacco caterpillar can go through a tomato plant and just annihilate it in the course of a day, and then it's sad because you got to eat your plant and not you. You can also put on row covers. If you're going to do that early, because obviously you're going to be getting caterpillars. They come from the eggs that are from the moths, and you want the moths to never come in contact with plants. That'll keep that from going on. And then there are also some things you can do, like bring in other insects like ladybugs, things like that, that might attack those types of bad insects and hopefully help your garden do a little bit better. You also want to think about the nutrition for your plants. How you're going to fertilize them. Are you going to use some kind of modern nitrogen-based fertilizer, which may not lead you to a balanced, nutritious plant? Or are you going to use an organic fertilizer like that described in Gardening When It Counts, or an organic fertilizer that you can get? You really do want to have a good, well-balanced fertilizer, though. Different plants need various different nutrients to grow, and if you just throw one nutrient at it, it's not going to necessarily get absorbed in the right proportions and used well. Tomatoes are particularly susceptible to something called blossom end rot, which comes from a calcium metabolism issue. So you want to make sure they have plenty of calcium and magnesium in whatever fertilizer, because those two tend to get used together. And that will help your tomatoes grow well, and you won't end up going, what's going on with my tomatoes? They'll get like funky and black on one end. And other than that, you just follow your guidelines, move them into your garden, make sure they get enough water, they have enough room to grow, and you treat your plants right, they'll treat you right, and hopefully you'll enjoy them. I hope this episode was useful to you. I hope you found it enjoyable, and let me know in the comments and ratings if you want to do something more. If you've got specific questions, you can shoot me an email at medicalmarinerinc@gmail.com. I look forward to hearing from you, and I hope you have a good day. Thank you for listening to Medical Mariner Inc. Medical Mariner Inc. is written, produced, and hosted by me, Paul Stewart. If you wish to make suggestions for content, leave me some comments, or have anything you would like for me to know, you can email me at medicalmarinerinc@gmail.com. Thank you for listening. To support the show, please give me a 5-star rating on whatever platform you listen on, like, and subscribe to the show. Thanks, and I hope you have a good day.